Welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast powered by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. Alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN, I am Darren Kinnard. Last week, you were off, had some other things going on, so we're back after a 2-week hiatus, so to speak, and a lot going on all of a sudden between bills in the General Assembly that have passed the House, and then last night we're recording on Friday morning, so Thursday night. News out of Johnston City. Big news on the coaching front.
Both Scott Brzezinski and Todd Thomas stepping away. Scott, of course, been a fixture on the boys basketball side of things as a coach for several decades, and then before that as a player himself. But aside from that, then also Todd Thomas, who's, I would say, probably the hottest kind of young coach in the area, just with what he's done with Johnston City. But both of them taking a step back. We've both talked to them, and they've basically said, we want to spend more time with family right now, and totally understand. And Todd's going to still be there for the football team, just in a lesser role. And so, but that leaves big holes to fill for both of those programs. The Indians on the football side, obviously, needing to keep that going. And obviously, I haven't heard a name that's going to fill that in, but they'd probably like to just get another assistant and bring them up. But for the basketball side of things, they're still searching to have a consistent and start running through the diamond a little bit more as a powerhouse. That's what they'd like to do on the boys basketball side, but have not had luck much in the past 20-some years.
Yeah, and, exchanged some messages with Scott last night, and, he said, hey, look, I've done this for 26 years and had a great ride. And, his kids are in high school. And I'm going to tell you from personal experience, once your kids get into high school, it goes by so fast.
Sure.
And I completely understand, a lot of times you hear that, I want to spend more time with family. And then 6 months later, they're doing something else. And for some, I feel like that's a crutch. I certainly don't think that's the case in either direction here. But just to touch on Johnston City and what Coach Thomas and company have done over the past few years, I think, people, this better than I do as far as when you're running the poll and people get all worked up because this team couldn't beat this team, blah, 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 blah. It's the nature of polls. It's the nature of things. But I don't think that it is out of line to say that Johnston City over the past 5, 6, 7 years has been the most successful program here in the South. There are those that haven't made the state championship game consistently, though, to make 2 semifinal appearances. Obviously, Murfreesboro's in a very similar boat there, and having been to a state championship. Nashville's had a great run, but what they've done at Johnston City has been pretty impressive.
Yeah, 5 straight winning seasons, and then 4 straight playoff appearances. That 5th season, of course, was the COVID season, but they've done a fantastic job, and it's not a one-and-done situation with these trips. Like you mentioned, multiple trips to the semifinals, but in the other 2 years, they won their first round. That's a testament to itself to say that no matter what, you're playing in a 10th and 11th game. Right. That's a big deal right there to be expecting to have that second playoff game. A lot of schools would kill for just one and say, we might get killed in that one, but at least we got that 10th game. To be like, no, we're not just getting a 10th, we're getting an 11th. That's a big deal. First 2 years for Todd, he knew it was going to be tough. It was a turnaround type of situation with Dan Mings leaving at that time. Things were not in the best place for Todd, and he said, I want to come home, I want to take care of business. And he got it turned right around, and now that program is set up for hopefully years to come to be continuing to be successful.
And, clearly Johnston City's been a program that's had success. Yeah. Mike Root had great success there. You talk about Dan Mings. They've had good quality coaching there. And, again, when you factor the COVID season and all that went into that, and to be able to kind of navigate that and then to still have that success and what's been impressive to me is that they've had young guys be a part of it.
Yes.
And so that's why the longevity has been there in this run, because the young guys are involved early, and then, when they're seniors, they're really dang good.
Yeah.
But then there's more young guys stepping in. And again, that's when you know that you've built a tradition and you've built, you've built the program, so to speak.
And him staying on staff will help kind of keep that going along while whoever takes the reins. Again, I think they're hoping it's an assistant, but I'm not sure exactly what the deal with that is at this moment in time. But whether it's someone that's familiar with it or someone that isn't, Todd being there still or offering to still be there still will definitely help that continue along the way, which is a big deal for Johnson City football. In terms of Scott, though, obviously it's going to be up to him. But once he gets through all that family time, he might sit there and say, you know what? What am I going to do with my time now? And might come back. I had remarked to you that he's just 10 wins away from 400, which is a big number, obviously. It's a big milestone. I'm sure, and I'm not sure if he knows that or not, but if he doesn't, now he does. And so he might be sitting there saying, well, 10 more, maybe in a couple years, I'll come back once I've had my fill, kind of.
Right. And that's the whole thing is that, obviously both guys, in this day and age, they're not retiring.
No.
And so the ability to down the road, if you want to get back in the coaching game, because, that's a calling.
Yeah.
it is. Because the amount of time that gets put in, and I don't know that those not involved or close to sports understand the amount of time and effort that goes in to, whether it's head coach or assistant coach or just, to develop a program, it's unofficially a year-long deal now.
Yeah.
And, you have the contact days in the summer, then you have the off-season weight rooms, and you have all this and that. And so it gets to be just a ton. And again, this is, they're not doing it for the money, because the stipend's small. If you break it down per hour, it ain't much.
No.
But again, it's, and maybe they get out and they realize, and we had talked about, in the past when COVID, when everything shut down, would that be, I felt like it would go two ways. One, it would either make coaches just super hungry,
right?
That, hey, I got to get back at it, or it's going to make them, especially when you're not playing during Christmas, like basketball, it's going to make them realize what they've missed. And maybe, and we did not see a mass exodus. We saw a little, but it was curious to me how that was going to play out. And by and large, most everybody navigated through it and came back, and it certainly changed some perspectives anyway.
And even during that time, I want to say that a majority of the ones that stepped away and like you said, kind of realized what they were missing, a lot of them, after they had their fill on that, a lot of them have kind of returned, mostly in kind of roles that would be like, okay, I'm going to take over, but I'm only going to be here for a couple years.
Sure.
But a lot of them have returned as well. And so that just speaks more to just how much of a calling it is, that you can sit there for 2-3 years, but eventually that itch is going to hit again. And that's why we see Mike Root still coaching and everything. Just for a lot of these guys, it is their life, and they wouldn't have it any other way.
No doubt about that. So the other big news is a lot of stuff. And look, we're sports guys. When we have to start talking about stuff in the Illinois General Assembly, it's not good. But
usually not.
Yeah, just in a situation where, in past years, more than a decade ago, there was a lot of talk about the General Assembly taking over the IHSA, and what has come out here. There are 3 different bills. 2 have passed the House, and both are referencing school mascots. One is directed really squarely at Freeburg for the use of midgets. They don't want, the bill is to eliminate mascots that have a derogatory nature for people with disabilities, but it's pretty squarely directed at Freeburg.
I don't know if there's another school.
Yeah,
in Illinois.
I think they wrote it a little broader, to cover some things, and then the other one is the bill about Native American mascots,
right?
And that has a much broader stroke. and in our area, it affects several schools, or could affect several schools. It's passed the House. They both have passed the House. The mascot, the Native American, has gone to the Senate. You looked it up the other day.
Yeah.
It's been read. It's been sent to the assignment committee. And again, it's been a long time since I studied General Assembly. But there they will decide whether it's going to come to a vote, I believe. And again, it's a situation where it's a very politically charged topic. And in all these towns, this has been the mascot for years, and so there is some strong pushback from these individual communities.
Yeah, it needs to be read 3 times in assembly to get put to vote. So we're still a little bit away from it, but don't be surprised if it gets assigned, and then once it gets assigned to a committee, that it goes right on through. Just needs 2 more readings to get to that point. So it could be happening very quickly. We also may not hear anything until the fall. So who knows exactly. But, I went to a school that used an Indian head, and I think it was right before I actually went into high school. That was when everything with Chief Illinois went down. And so they said, maybe we should veer away from this a little bit. Went to just a spear instead. Didn't even have a feather, I don't think, from what I recall. But I understand both sides, because I have Native American friends that have said that, don't mind it. I'm okay with it. There's pride behind it. And I've also had ones that have said, I'm not a mascot. So I get both sides of it. But I can understand, especially like DuQuoin, hearing a little bit about that story, about how just it's named after the DuQuoin tribe and everything. And so I get it. And there's a lot of schools that outside of kind of like that central Illinois area where Champaign and then kind of went out a little bit. You felt that a little bit from just the Chief Illinois, but other areas of the state, I moved down here 8.5 years. Whoa, I didn't realize that we were still doing that. And I mean, there's a lot of pride behind it, and I get where a lot of people on the pushback are coming from as well. And so, I mean, there's a lot of different sides to it, but the General Assembly sitting there saying that they don't want to open that can of worms anymore. And,
the interesting thing is that this is, the history of Indians in this region. You talk about Cahokia and, and all those type things. And again, you're right. There have been some Native Americans. There's not a unanimous either way.
Right.
There's not unanimous support. There's not unanimous, we don't want this. And so that's the hard part. And for me, and not trying to be political in either direction. It's just, it's hard when there's not a consensus of that for people that are not of that, of not that descent, to tell people how they should feel.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not going to come on here and say, well, you should feel this way or you shouldn't feel this way. That's up to them, know, and we can all have our opinions. But again, not in some would say, the argument is, well, there are those in those situations that they don't feel like they can say what needs to be said, and somebody needs to say it for them. I get that, but again, I guess the part of me that, and not to downplay this, but it's like we've got two bills about mascots. We've got a third bill that we'll talk about here in a second about IHSA eligibility for transfers. For the love of all that is going on, there's got to be more important things. And again, that's not to say that the Native Americans are unimportant. But when it feels like when you're going to go into this mascot situation that it's like, well, we've got everything else taken care of. Now let's work on this stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where a lot of people sit there and say, there's a few bigger fish to fry right now, folks, no matter what side of the aisle that you're on, or if you're just in the middle of the aisle. I think everybody's sitting there saying, this is small potatoes compared to what is actually on the board, and maybe we should focus on that stuff instead. But maybe it's instead something that the Assembly is sitting there and saying, well, this is something that we can actually get done. Maybe also, I don't know.
Yeah, and the third bill is it's not made it to vote yet, and it's
Thankfully.
And the IHSA has gone on a kind of a quiet campaign behind the scenes trying to get this, but it's basically in simple terms, it allows students and athletes the ability to transfer twice without any
You're right.
approval, whatever. They can just up and leave. And some of the examples used were, this person could lose in the regional and then show up on a
Right.
sectional, because there's no rules when it comes to transfer eligibility.
Right.
And I mean, again, I always joked, you could always tell when news people wrote sports stories.
Yeah.
This is a situation where people unfamiliar with sports are trying to get involved with things that they don't know, and somebody has said, hey, this, you need to put a bill out on this. And first of all, going back is why is the General Assembly getting involved in transfer rules in the IHSA?
Right.
Go find something more important to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of comes back in my mind about just the fact that without saying it really, there's no guardrails on this thing. If you want to go that route, I think you and I and a lot of people in sports in Southern Illinois at least would say why you don't need to do that. But if you want to go that route, you need to put guardrails on it. You got to, because there's a reason why that example of losing in a regional, showing up in a sectional the very next week is a thing, because that is exactly how it is worded right now.
It's a worst case scenario, but you know what?
It could happen.
It could happen.
And it will happen. I promise you it will, and it will happen the first year that the bill is in. That's exactly what will happen. And that's because there's no guardrails there, so people are going to take advantage of it. If you want to do something like this, I think you have to put down that, okay, if you transfer, then you don't lose your eligibility for the next year. But once you transfer, you're done for your eligibility the rest of the school year. I think that's the only way to look at it, and that's how a lot of people are going to transfer anyways, so it won't make a difference. But let's not go ahead and allow people to say, well, I'm going to transfer over there, and then when that season's done, I'll come. No, because then we're looking at free agency in high school athletics.
Right, and I think that we've all seen the transfer portal and just the nonsense that's going on in the college game. That just blows your mind. And backing up a little bit, just one more thing on the mascots. It was very interesting to me that it was only high school and
That's
below,
right.
because they did not want to deal with the college and universities because of the flagship program of the state. And Chief Illiniwek was taken out. That was NCAA stuff.
Right.
That wasn't a state law. That wasn't the school's decision at all. And so they've kind of avoided any of that. Hey, we're gonna crack down on the high schools and do that. And
exactly. And so off the top of my head, I think there's 3 area high schools that would be affected, but there'd be a bunch more on the lower levels. But we were talking about, if they had decided to go ahead and attack the college as well, Rand Lake would be affected.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is that you do the high schools, and so Johnston City, Shawnee, the Lawrenceville, Casey Westfield, all but then it's okay for Rand Lake,
right?
And so that feels a little strange,
very strange.
But anyway, so then you've got those 2 bills that have passed the House. You got one that's sitting there that hasn't got to vote yet, and then the other hot topic that came out this week was. The IHSA was pressed for a response about transgender athletes, and look, there are huge opinions, on both sides of this, and this isn't about what Darren thinks. I just don't know what the IHSA is expected to do, because
I don't either.
Because Illinois' lawmakers, the powers that be, have said you have to. And now you have federal coming in and saying you can't do it.
Exactly.
And they just said, look, you guys all need to get on the same page so we have a direction.
Right.
And people have lost their minds at the IHSA. And again, there are things to be critical of the IHSA, and I understand that there are strong opinions about whether the transgender athletes should be competing or not.
Right.
But you have to understand the IHSA, they have no power in this situation. Right. If they go against the state, then the state can cut school funding for 3/4 of their membership. And so then if they follow the if they follow the state and not the federal, now what happens? Right. And it's a lot like the COVID rules. Everybody was just so mad at the IHSA because they weren't doing it, and you should go play, and you should. You can't.
Yep.
I mean, they don't necessarily answer to the IHSA, or the IHSA doesn't answer to the General Assembly, but all those public schools get money from the state.
That's right. Yep.
Come on.
And I mean, the other side of it is, I think this happened to Maryland the other day, is that they did say we're going to stand with our state, basically came out publicly and said that, and so now the federal government is suing that entity. And so, and their statement was put out there before this whole thing happened with, I believe it was Maryland. I could be wrong about that. But before that happened, and then like the very next day, the federal government said, okay, we're going to sue that entity now. Well, now that just gives the IHSA more reason to say, we aren't touching that. Why would we want to be sued? But why would we want our schools to have their funding cut? And so, and I was talking with somebody, and they kind of said to me that, it feels like a loaded statement because, and I was like, well, what do you want them to say? Right. They say one way or another, and someone's coming after you, Right. We got to put ourselves in the shoes. I know a lot of people dislike the people there, but this is one of those times where where you say, okay, if I was in their shoes, what would I do? Because now that you got both sides of the story here, and you're saying, well, you're between a rock and a hard place. What do you stay neutral is what you do.
Right.
You say we don't touch that at all.
And again, this isn't about support or against or whatever. I mean, this is not about feelings. This is about what do you do if you're this entity when you're being told you have to, and then you got this side going you can't, and if you choose one or the other, the offended side is coming with the hammer.
Exactly.
And it's a true can't win situation. And again, this isn't about the topic. I mean, the topic is a whole other conversation, and I again get the feelings that I get all of the emotions that are involved. And I haven't gone and fact checked it, but the reality is that the number of actual transgender athletes is, over the course of the last decade plus is 50, and it's 50 plus, and
I don't even know if there's really any in Illinois right now.
And again, it's not something that I've done a great deal of study on. It feels like it's one of those topics that so many people have beat the drum because it is such a hot button topic.
Sure.
And then the reality is that, it's not as if, oh, well, this, that we saw this team go and win a state title, or we saw this individual go and do these things. But again, that is, honestly irrelevant of the conversation. Is, when you just have to look at it and go, what do you expect the IHSA to do? And I go back to COVID. It's the same thing. Everybody's like, well, by golly, they should play. They should just say, we're going to play. Well, that's easy to say.
It's very easy.
It's easy to say, especially from your recliner. But when it comes down to it, you're having to look out for, what's best for all of your schools. And at the end of the day, the schools, they have a board that is made up of the administrators from the various schools across the state, and they have to look out for what are the repercussions of if we go this way or if we go this way.
Right. I mean, it basically comes down to, do we mess with our members, which is a member-driven league, or do we potentially, risk going irrelevant and basically getting sued out of existence? That's a very real possibility as well. And so again, that's why they stay neutral, and they say, you guys figure that out.
It's just baffling to me that you sit and see so many times, and I understand the frustration on the private-public debate stuff, and hopefully that's moving in the right direction. Look, if I had a nickel for every time I heard somebody go, well, just let's leave the IHSA and have somebody else start a new organization, and who's going to do that?
Right.
And then what would that look like either? Again, I'm not saying the IHSA is perfect in any stretch of the imagination, but just to sit out there and go, oh, well, there's got to be a better way to, there's got to be another organization that can come in and run it. And what does that look like? And again, I just think that's a whole can of worms that is just a silly conversation.
Well, spoiler alert, there isn't another organization right now, and the amount of work that it's going to take to create another one is just I can't even imagine. I can't fathom how much it's going to take. It will be years in the making before something like that actually happens, unless, of course, you just hand it off to the state government, which I think also is something that maybe it sounds
because that works so well for so many other things.
Exactly. It's one of those things that at the time, with certain things happening that people aren't happy with, might sound like a great idea because, we'll get away from the IHSA, but that's all you're doing. I promise you there will be more issues, probably bigger issues that crop up from people that are involved in sports that don't know a lick about sports.
Right, or you get an organization in there that their prime goal is to make profit, and they start charging schools. There's just a whole other thing.
IHSA is nonprofit.
It's just a whole can of worms that I just find fascinating that people keep going to that. It's like, I understand frustrations, but at the end of the day, the goal should be to make it a better situation.
Yeah.
And again, especially going back to like the public-private thing, you got 3/4 of your membership is public.
Yep.
It's incumbent on them to be able to come up with something to get before the membership to vote to fix it.
Yeah.
Again, but in so many cases, and just like all the people complaining in their recliners, it's easy to have all the answers when you're not in the middle of it, and come up with something that somebody else should be doing.
Well, and I'd love to hear what their suggestions are, if they have any as well.
Just not the IHSA.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things. It's just like there's always going to be an issue, just like there is with government and stuff. But there's also good things. We just got to get through the field and find the city of Oz, if you will.
Well, here's hoping, and I know this is probably not going to be the case, but here's hoping that this is our one and only political podcast.
We tried to keep it as unpolitical as possible.
Yeah,
too.
And because look, I don't need the mobs from either direction coming at us.
Yeah.
We're not here taking a stand on it, and then there'll be a mob that's coming for us because we didn't take a stand.
Right.
But the reality is that this will come up again when it either comes to vote or if it comes to be, any of these bills end up passing the Senate and going to the governor for a signature. Yep. And for the mascot situation, just one more retreat back to that is this is what would be an unfunded mandate.
That's right.
And the fact that, the schools, if it passes, would be given a date that they have to come up with a plan. And then there's a date that they have to be transitioned over, and so that means that anything that's on floors or on turf or on all the uniforms, all the logos, all of that stuff would have to be replaced. And man, and I'm glad they actually gave them years to do it.
Yeah. But
what a painstaking process and an expensive process that would end up being.
Well, and what I understand is it would be by September 1st, 2028. So, I could very well see if this passes and eventually does become, and that's the date, I'm pretty sure that'd be week 2 of the high school football season. So don't be surprised if this comes to pass. If, week 1 of 2028, you see a couple of schools in the area trot out one more time those uniforms. But yeah, it will be something that if this comes to pass, which in my eyes, it's an inevitability at this point. It just feels that way. and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me on that. But if it does come to pass, like you said, it's going to be unfunded, so it's going to put the squeeze on a lot of communities that, you look at a lot of these communities also, they've already been put on the squeeze. It's not going to be something that, there's a surplus somewhere that they can find. No, this is going to bring a lot more hurt for something that probably didn't need to be addressed at this moment in time. But again, I go back to, I've also had friends, people that I went to school with even, that said, I'm not a mascot. And I hear them on that as well.
Absolutely.
But, this isn't the NFL Washington team that has all the money in the world to make this rebrand happen. These are small schools that are going to have to find a way to make it work. Also, by the way, while the shot clock is being put in and all these other things.
Right.
And just so it's just going to put the squeeze on schools that really could use it to maybe they can go in and say, listen, okay, we hear you, but could we maybe get an extension a little bit further, not for the lack of trying or anything, but just the fact that, do you want to see our books?
Right. Well, and then the other, just one other little caveat is where does, we know Indians, we know Redskins,
right,
those type of things, the Comanches from Cahokia. But what about all the Warriors?
Right.
And where does that fit? And I know that, you mentioned your school had the spear but no feather. And, is that going to be allowed? And there's just a lot of questions that, again, just a basic reading of the bill, and it just there's a lot that could end up happening.
Well, and Warriors is so generic. It feels like, okay, if you're told you got to get away from Warriors, you could probably keep the name itself,
right?
But whatever,
Golden State,
right? Exactly. But in terms of, okay, we can't have that figurehead anymore, so let's go to a different one. Well, at that point, whatever you come up with, you're going to be like, why don't we just change it to what? Because it's such a generic term,
right?
But at the same time, you're using a very generic term with a specific kind of figurehead right now as well. So maybe it won't be that big of a deal if they say, okay, we'll stay the Warriors, but we're gonna have a Viking head instead or something. I'm not sure exactly, but
right.
but I have
who's gonna be what committee is going to approve whether that's acceptable or not, and again, I know that everybody has to if it's passed, they would have to put together a plan, and it's just things that go on in my mind.
Well,
just questions.
A lot of them, just as we mentioned earlier, DuQuoin, they have that heritage in there baked into the town name. What direction do all these schools potentially go is a very real question then, and it's an interesting one also. It's a nice little thought experiment that I've been running in the past couple of just what direction would they go instead? And some of them, I think, again, DuQuoin, they have reason to try to stick to that, but maybe try to delve into like Native American mythology or something. But just some of them, I'm curious.
Right.
And again, I have a feeling that it's an inevitability. So in the next couple of years, I guess we'll be finding out. But I'm real curious. Just what direction is everybody going to go then?
Yeah. Like I said, hopefully this is our last non-political podcast for a while, and we'll be back talking more of the spring sports here. It's hard to believe we're already pushing the end of April, and that means we're just a handful of weeks away from the postseason, and oh my gosh, it's crazy how fast it goes.
I know. It'll be here before you know it.
Well, that's going to do it for this River Radio Sports Central podcast, powered by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll talk to you again next week.